The first comment I ever got on my YouTube page was one word: faggot. Yes, that's right, they had a one-word insult for me, and they spelt it wrong. I left the comment up there, though, for one very good reason. I felt it reflected more poorly on the person who had left the message than it did on me. Now, I did write off to the person to make sure the account hadn't been hacked into by somebody trying to cause trouble, but they didn't take that inquiry too well. So here's the thing about freedom of speech. It's a double-edged sword. You can insult who you like, but be aware that if you exercise your freedom of speech, you might simply be exposing yourself as an ass. So the 20th of May is Draw Mohammed Day, where people are encouraged to draw Mohammed as an act of freedom of speech. I'm somewhat ambivalent about this, and here's why. On the one hand, I think it's a good idea for two reasons. Firstly, I think it's important to stand up and say that we oppose the likes of those who murdered Theo van Gogh for being critical of Islam. Islam has its tenets, for good or ill, but it doesn't mean that those who hold to them should force others to obey them on pain of death. Secondly, there seems to be a misunderstanding on the censure against depicting Muhammad, although I could be wrong on this point. My understanding on the subject is that the ban on depicting Muhammad is to prevent him from being idolized. If my understanding of this is correct, then the threat levelled against South Park for depicting Muhammad is a perversion of this stricture. Rather than maintaining Muhammad as an individual unworthy of worship when compared to Allah, albeit that he was a person worthy of great respect, he has instead been elevated to a level of veneration comparable to that of Allah. This is merely a form of idolatry without pictures. On the other hand, though, I worried that Draw Mohammed Day will be exploited to promote a particularly nasty breed of anti-Muslim sentiment. While I have many misgivings about Islam and the Islamic world, I have very little time for a view that conflates the worst proponents of Islam with Islam in general. I personally want no association with those who use freedom of speech as an excuse to be as offensive as possible with very little intellectual contribution of any sort. Yes, part of the reason freedom of speech is valued is because unpleasant truths sometimes need to be spoken. But when what is spoken is mostly unpleasantness and precious little truth, we've greatly devalued that currency. In the end, I've decided to join in Draw Mohammed Day. Here is the man that Muslims hail as the prophet with one of the better quotes from the Quran. And further to the point of freedom of speech, I address these remarks to those who have chosen to depict Muhammad engaged in intercourse with an animal. It is your right to make such depictions, and no one should kill you for having done so. However, it is also my right to consider you an idiot of poor creativity and mean spirit for having done so, and I intend to exercise that right.